Hari Om everyone. We are starting today's class on Nyaya. We'll start with the chanting first. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Gananam Tva Ganapati Havamahe कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणस्पत आन शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् ॐ श्रीमहागणपतये नमः सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. Okay, so we are starting this class on Nyaya today. We are into the fourth chapter of this book, the fourth chapter, part 2, and we were doing the 11th sutra in the last class. So that is where we will continue. So we have completed fourth chapter, part 1. That is, in total, there are 7 sub chapters or 7 parts, you can say. We are into the 8th now. So this is the 11th sutra. We have done this earlier, and I'll just recap this. So before this, we were looking at whether the parts of the composite entity, the avyayi, they are separate from the avyayi. So avyav and the avyavi, the parts and the whole, whether they are separate. So this, the answer has been given in this sutra. Ekasmin भेद भावात भेद शब्द प्रयोग अनुपपत्तेः अप्रश्नः. Right. So in this, he has said that when we are looking at the one entity, then from that angle of one, when we are calling something as one, then the parts and the whole you cannot separate. So ekasmin. So in that one entity, there is no bheda. The composites might be there. So the bhed shabd prayoga, the using of a word to differentiate between the part and the whole is not appropriate, not correct, right? So if a subject or if an object is a sum of parts, then raising the question as to where the parts reside and where the total resides, that is being said, it is pointless. So first we have to understand either there is a collection of similar objects, which will be called a bunch, or you can say a large measure, or there is a collection of many different objects to produce one functional identity. So that one functional identity is the one which we call as the avyayi, and that uh, function cannot be done one of the parts by one of the parts or few of the parts, right? So you may assume the difference that one part is different from the other parts. That difference we are ready to accept. But the whole and the part difference is a very illogical difference, we say. It is not to be accepted in any case. So, uh, what we are defining that functional entity, we are defining that whole as a functional entity. So, what we call it, many large objects come together. Many large objects come together and they produce a functional entity, which function cannot be done by one of the parts or a few of them together, and they become an instrument for performing an action for another conscious entity. So, if we remember the definition of mithya, if you remember the definition of mithya, then we call it Sanghatasya Pararthatvat. Sanghatasya Pararthatvat. So when any combination of things is made, it is always for the use of another a different entity, right? Generally, what we'll call another conscious entity. So that conscious entity is going to use that sum of parts, right? So if you are talking about, we saw earlier also, if there is chariot. The chariot is composed of different parts, but that chariot is not for its own use. It is for the rider. Similarly, in the case of this soul functioning as the Jivatma due to ignorance, we have the body that has come together as a sum of parts. So the body becomes an instrument for the Jiva, and this is the instrument that it uses to transact with the objects around it, right? The objects also are created by Ishvara, the body is also created by Ishvara according to our karma phala. Whatever we are karma phala, according to that, we are given a body. So this functional entity, it cannot be denied to exist, just like a chariot exists for the rider, or is you can say it is not a sum of parts, none of which is useful on its own. Yeah, the sum of parts you cannot use. You cannot use the axle. You cannot use the tire. You cannot use the seat of the chariot on its own. For the same function that the chariot will do, right? So this way we have this functional entity called the body, but will it at some future time, of course, it will dissolve into its components, and so then the only thing advisable here, what we are talking about, we should not lose our focus on the original issue, is that when we are talking about liberation here, moksha here in the initial part, so that is dependent upon us giving up our ego in the body, right? So we should not mistake the ego with the body as the center. Our problem, how does it arise? How does our problem arise? Our problem arises when we start thinking of the instrument as I, right? The instrument is what we think as, we perceive or apply as I. So now this term which we are using totally or partially, you cannot apply this to the one single entity. That is a separate existence, that is a separate entity as a whole itself, right? So then we go on to the next one also. So avyava antar abhave api avrittehe ahetu. Right. So avyav antar bhave api avrittehe ahetu. So avyav, the parts, antar abhave. There are spaces in between the parts, and there is, of course, there is a certain space that is occupied by each part, right? So abhave api avritte ahetu. By that logic, you cannot say that the whole needs to occupy a certain separate space from that, right? So the question ahetu, the question itself is irrelevant. So what do we understand here? The parts will occupy spaces mutually separate from each other. So one part cannot occupy the space that is reserved for the other part. That is acceptable. But that does not mean the whole needs a very separate space apart from what the parts are occupying. So he's saying, we say that the question itself is irrelevant. The whole has to be considered as a separate entity, and its space occupied cannot be considered to be separate from what the parts are occupying. Is this clear, or is there any confusion here so far? George, Anita? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So when we are looking at the relationship between the parts and the whole, we give two names for that. The refuge and the refugee, right? Adhar, Adheya, Sambandha. That is the Sambandha relationship between the parts and the whole. So the Adhar is the whole. Right. So it is the whole. And its refuge is Adheya, the different parts. So just like you can say in the case of any kind of what we call the material cause. So the material cause is the refuge of everything that is built out of that material cause. So just like a pot, it is the Adhar, it is the refuge of all the mud is the refuge of all different sizes of pots and any other kind of utensils that can be built with it, or other objects also, right? You can build an image, a pratima, and so on. So many different things you can build. So similarly, if we go to the Atma, then Atma, of course, is a refuge of everything. Everything has been projected or come out of Atma only. Even though the Atma is not divided, but divided into parts. So if then Atma remains the same, just like the mud remains the same. The quantity of mud will not vary. Or if you take the case of gold also, the gold ornament will be built out of the gold, but the quantity of gold will remain the same. So there is no change in the gold as such in the total content or the matter. Similarly, in the Atma, where there is no parts, even there is no division also, everything that is visible, it cannot be the division of Atma or shaping of the Atma. It is only a projection, right? Otherwise, uh, the infinite nature of Atma will be refuted or nullified. So we have to remember this point very clearly, that whatever is the refuge and the whatever be the its refugee. So the refuge and the refugee, they are intimately connected. They are very intimately connected, and the refuge that is there, it is the one that has original existence, and the refugee, the one that is dependent, it has dependent existence. It has no existence of its own, right? So in this way, the refuge has to be taken as this entity, the total entity, which is going to be used. So when the refuge goes away, then the refugee also disappears, right? So when you take out the mud, when the mud goes back into its original cause, then all the pot also disappears, right? So this is how this we answer this objection, right? So a refuge always has to have intimate existence with the refuge. So then he is now raising another objection, right? So what is this objection? केश समूहे तैमिरिक उपलब्धिवत tat uplavdhi. Right? So he is saying effectively that when we are looking at what we say a collection of hairs, right? When there is a collection of hair, uh, then that is visible to most persons. But if there is a person who has this disease called Tamirica, Tamirica is basically night blindness, right? It is night blindness. We call it in Hindi also, we call it Ratandi. So someone who cannot see, someone who is blind in the dark. For that person or with whose eyesight is weak, then he says, can we kesh samuh, the collection of hair, tamirik uplabdhivat tat uplabdhi. So the one hair is not visible to that person because his eyesight is weak. But can we understand then that this avyavi, this whole total is visible only when the parts, when it comes together in many parts. When all those parts come together, then it is like a collection of parts. So we have already answered this in a way, but just to if we can understand the answer before we go on to the actual sutra. So basically, he's saying that why can't we accept that this avyavi is just visible because the parts have come together? But avyavi is never only one collection of objects. It is always a collection of different functional objects, right? So here he is pointing towards the uh, starting point of all uh, creation. That is from what we call the basic particle, which is the Parmanu, right? So he's saying just like a group of Parmanus, they can come together, a group of these smallest atoms, and when they come together, we can perceive them. So why can't we consider the avyavi to be of similar nature, right? So this we answer in two parts. Right? So here we take into account the uh, sphere of operation of every sense organs, every indriya, right? The sphere, every indriya has a sphere of option, sphere of operation. So swa vishay an atikramen indriyasya patu mand bhavat विषय ग्रहणस्य तथा भाव अविषय न प्रवृत्ति. So swa-vishay anatikramen. Every sense organ has its own swa-vishay, its vishay. We saw in Tattvabodh also, every indriya can cognize one sense object only. So the eyes can cognize only color or form, right? The ears can cognize only the sound. So and so on for every sense organ. Every sense organ has its own sense object. That is the only one. So we cannot taste with the ear. Otherwise, we would be pushing food into our ear. We cannot, hear with the tongue. So otherwise, we'll be roaming around, taking our tongue out to listen to things. So it is not logical. It is not observed, right? So what we are saying, pointing to is mainly that sharpness or dullness. It will apply to each indriya as its own sense object. So indriyasya patu manda bhavat. So if any object cannot be perceived by a sense organ, it has to be the sense object of that sense organ itself. उसी इंद्रिय का विषय होना पड़ेगा. It has to be the same one, right? Then only. But there might be perception or there might not be, because the indriya itself is sharp or dull, patu or man. So if the sense organ is dull, then maybe the apprehension will not take place. Or like if there is not sufficient light, then there is a such small object we can't see. So we have to strain. Someone dropped a needle on the floor, and the floor's color is also something close to the needle. So you search around, and it will not be visible to you. So that is uh, like your grandma is searching for it. And then she asks you, please help me, it's fallen down. And your eyes are sharper, and you quickly find it and you hand it over to her. Right? So that patuman bhava might be there, but the object that is being perceived is the one having a certain color or a certain shape. So that is perceived by the eyes. But we are saying this patuman bhav will be applying to Vishaya Grahanasya, its own sense object. So the object that is not within the range of the sense organs, which is in our case, what is that? That is the Parmanu, the smallest possible unit of any matter. So smallest possible unit of any matter is what we call supersensuous. It is supersensuous. It is beyond the perception of these normal sense organs, and so it cannot be perceived. So hence their collection also cannot be perceived. So it's not that one Parmanu is not visible and their collection you bring together and they will suddenly become visible, because then what we say in our systems, I'll come to this a bit later also, is that the coming together is not just, bringing few things together, but they will combine together to form a separate entity, right? So if there is a smallest of chemical, if the smallest of element, let's say in modern science terms, it's hydrogen, right? So this hydrogen is not something that is a collection of very, very small hydrogen atoms. I can see a hydrogen atom when they make a big collection of it, but that is not what is our Parmanu. What is the Parmanu in our Indian sense, right? In our Vaisheshika sense, or in our what we call Darshan Shastra sense. So according to this Indian science, that is not the Parmanu. The Parmanu, you can say, is the smallest possible particle, but they will have different different size, different kinds of properties, and those will come together to produce that single hydrogen atom. So you can say in this case, the proton, the electron, and so on. So there are other also subdivisions of particles of each of these also. So all these, when they come together, these are different particles, and they combine in a certain fashion, in a certain manner, so that then a particular element is visible. So those elements you can bring together in a sufficient big mass and they can be perceived. But the Parmanu itself it cannot be perceived, right? So each here, if it is being perceived, their collection can be perceived, but not the Parmanu. The Parmanu itself, you cannot bring it into the vision or the sense range of perception of eyes, right? So next, he brings up the opponent he brings in another small opposition. So he says that this avyavi that you're talking about, at the time of pralayam, at the time of total destruction, it will disappear. So even the basic parts that are constituting that, it will disappear. So they will end, ultimately be destroyed. So avyavi, prasangacha, evam, apralayat. Apralayat, up till pralaya. So this whole and its parts, avyav and avyavi, they should then continue till the time of pralaya when the whole universe reverts to the causal state. Initially, now it is in the manifest state, the whole universe is in the manifest state. But when it goes back to the causal state, the parts he's saying will be ultimately destroyed. So parts we are talking about the smallest one. So he means to say that the Parmanu itself will ultimately be destroyed. So how can you posit this entity having come to any existence when that parts itself will be gone? So, there is a rule in Vedanta which says something that has no beginning and something that we call as pragabhav, something that did not exist before it was born, and something that existed will not exist after death. This we use for the body. So before being born, pragabhav. After dying, it is pradvansha bhav. Is this part clear? Pragabhav, pradvansha bhav. George, Anita.
Sir, could you explain that again?
Yeah, because this is used a lot in Nyaya also. So it's used in Vedanta also. So we say that there are two kinds of non-existence, right? There are two kinds of non-existence. So that out of those two non-existences, one is what we call Pragabhav. Pragabhav is before being born. That means this body that I'm seeing right now, before being born, it did not exist. So Prag is before, Abhav means non-existence. Is it okay? Pragabhav? Okay. So then similarly, you apply this to the other side. So when we die, this body goes back into its own elements. So we said this body itself has no existence. It was only the elements, right? It was just the sum of elements that came together and produced this body. So this body has both Pragabhav and both also Pradvansha Bhav. That means it has no reality even in the current time. Because someone that there is a shloka used in Mandukya Upanishad Karika, and also it is used in Gita chapter 2, 16th to 20th verses. There Shankaracharya is explaining this very aspect, that anything that exists before and after the production, it is non-existent. That means even in the current state, it is non-existent, right? So Antavattam, shall I share it, or is it okay if I just mention it?
It's okay if you just mention
Okay.
it, sir.
So
But still,
Ada,
it's not clear why it is not existent now.
yeah, I'll explain a bit more. So the shlok exactly is Ada Vante Chayan Nasti Vartamane Api Tattatha Vitathai Sadrisha Santo Avitha Eva Lakshita. So what we are saying is basically that this body, it did not exist before. So we can take the example of, let us say there is a desk in front of you, right? And there is, I say that I take a rope. This rope is hidden by the desk in front of you. And I push the rope from one side, then the other side should move, right? And then if I push from the left side, the right one should move if it is a continuous rope. No, it has a continuous existence. But if it is not there, if there is no continuous existence, then it will not move, right? Similarly, if there is no rope on both ends, then it means there is no rope in the middle also, right? So for anything to have existence, its existence has to be continuous. Sat is something that must be existent in all periods of time. That is the definition of Sat. So this body we say is mithya. Mithya meaning it has no existence of its own. It is dependent for its existence on the what we call the material cause from which it has come. So that means the body itself has no existence of its own. It earlier also it was the Panch Tattvas. Later also it will be the Panch Tattvas. Right now also it is a Panch Tattva only. I am seeing this only because there is a shape that has been imposed on the body. Right. So this logic they use in denying that the individual existence or the separate existence or the reality of the body. Sat. It is not Sat. It is Mithya. Right. So when we use this or we are using this same logic for this, he is using the same logic, the opponent, for the Parmanus. He's saying that the Parmanu also will disappear at the time of Pralaya. So if they are disappearing, that means now also they are not there. Right. So we say that this Pralaya thing is okay, that during Pralaya, all the visible objects will go back into what we call the dark state, the dark state. But they will stay, be there in the unmanifest form, right? They will be there in the unmanifest form, from where again a new universe will come out. It is not that the universe will totally disappear. Pralaya does not mean total annihilation or total disappearance. So this logic we'll use for the Anu also, the atoms also. So is it clear so far about the uh, body having no reality of its own in the current time? Yeah. And similar logic we can apply. We cannot apply to the Parmanu. We cannot apply to the Parmanu. Why? Because we look into the next one. So earlier he said Pralaya. At the time of Pralaya, the Parmanus also will disappear. We say no. So na Pralayaha Anu Sadbhavat. So at the time of Pralaya, we say the Anus, they will not disappear. So we have what we call a law of conservation of matter and energy, right? In modern science. This same law also we accept in our systems, in Nyaya Vaisheshik and all other similar systems, where we say by this law of conservation of matter, there cannot be any kind of total annihilation. But even in the causal state, the object will go into unmanifest state. So there what we call the Parmanus remain. So what are the Parmanus? In Vaisheshik we see that Parmanus are the materials at the very smallest possible level, right? So this also will go into a bit more later on. So Parmanus are there at the causal state. They will always stay there, right? So Parmanu has actually zero mass and zero, you can say, size. But in a way, when it comes to zero mass, then that mass becomes at the time of uh, total destruction, that mass merges with the total mass of the universe. So there is no separate Parmanus. Right? It is there in the Parmanu, is there in the unmanifest potential state. So for that, you have to apply some kind of vibration to it. That will come from the nada, from the om. From when creation starts, the word starts. From in Christianity also there is this thing. In the beginning there was the word. They will not understand it, but we understand it. So you ask them, you read. I have read, thousands of pages of their arguments about in the beginning was the word, but there is no such understanding for them of the word as the primal sound from which everything is manifest. So that is a separate topic. We are into this our own system. So in our own system, when we say that Parmanu is there in the potential form, when the universe is manifest, then all our vasanas combine together to produce those shabdas, those words, which then provide vibration and different kinds of materials are manifested. Of course, the jiva doesn't do it. It is Ishvara. It is the one who's controlling the whole universe. I can control only very small parts, so I cannot manifest anything. I can create the vasana for that manifestation, but the actual manifestation will come only when this vasana is ready to bear fruit and Ishvara will manifest. So that will look later also, or look as a separate topic. But for this Anu, for this Parmanu, we say that even there is sadbhava, it is always there. The Parmanu will always be there. And so by the law of conservation of matter, there cannot be total annihilation even in the causal state. So the Parmanus will remain eternally, even at the time of pralaya. But in that state, they are inseparable from each other as there is no perceiver. There, the perceiver is not there. The perceiver is in the state of nidra, sleep, right? So, just like in deep sleep, we are not perceiving any object. So, all the objects go back into causal state. So, at that point, what is happening? They also become one with the infinite reality. So, each Parmanu in itself becomes infinite. So, the question of the lapse of the parts and the whole doesn't arise. The parts and the whole being going into lapse will not arise because they will still exist in the unmanifest state. Right? So then we go into the next one. Param. So now they will raise a doubt on the divisibility of this. So we are saying param va trute. So our definition of atom itself is param va trute, that is incapable of dividing. Huh. Uh, it is in the last state of divisions. It is not divisible into further parts. So here it is given two atoms make a dvayanuka, a dyad, three makes a trishanu, and so on. So all these are composite entities, but atom being indivisible, it is in the smallest invisible state, right? So there we cannot say come into the Parmanu getting, further divided. It is indivisible. It is never destroyed. That is why it is never destroyed. It cannot be divided into any smaller parts. So we combine 2, 3, 4, that will become a different entity. Right. So then the opponent raises another objection to this. Akash vyatibheda tat anupapatti. So he's saying that Akasha Vyati Veda. So this Akasha, which we accept as all pervading, which we accept as not having any parts. So this, if this Akasha being all pervading, the invisibility of the Parmanus cannot be accepted because uh, space is both inside and outside of the Parmanu. So that we cannot accept the Parmanus, the atoms, as being, having a size. If you say accept it as having a certain size, then that size is something that will inhibit the all pervasive nature of space. So that is said in the next sutra also. Akash sarvagatatvam va. So then in that case, we cannot accept the sarvagatatvam, the omnipresence of this ether. This omnipresence of ether. So ether this ether or Akash, we cannot call it omnipresent or sarvavyapi. Sarvavyapi is the proper term, or sarvagatatvam. There is a slight difference between sarvagatatvam and sarvavyapi. We can look at it later on, but right now, just if we concentrate on the fact that sky is being mentioned as sarvagat. So, this ether or this space, he is saying if it cannot be called sarvagat if there are atoms in between that are we call breaking up its continuity. There is a continuity, break in the continuity of space, or there is what we call a discontinuity. So for that we answer. The answer is given in the next sutra. So antah bahihi cha karya dravyasya karan antara vachanat akarye tat abhav. So antar bahi. So this differentiation of the within and without, we say this applies to things in their state as karya dravyasya, as effects. And not in the causal state, not in the karan antar vachanat. So something, when it is an effect, it is combined with other particles, and then the inner and outer exists. So this particle is combined with this, and there is an inner or outer. So like there is a body. So if there are so many elements composing the body, so they will create a wall, and there is an inner and outer, right? So, but in the causal state, the Parmanus are one with the ether. They are one with Akash only. There is no separation. So there cannot be any inner or outer. So hence this all pervation is not negated. We cannot say that this all pervasive nature of space is negated. Then also another way of looking at space as being all pervasive. So, so सर्व संयोग शब्द विभवात च सर्वगतत्वम. So actually there is a slight misalignment of the words here, but anyway, we go to the gist. So we are saying this word sarva shabd, all the words. Sanyog vibhavatya sarvagatatvam. Wherever you go in the space, anywhere that you go in space, you can produce a sound. If there is not there, you cannot delineate or separate any part of space where sound cannot be produced, right? Of course, sound may not be manifest. Sound needs another medium to manifest, at least vayu, air, or of course all the other elements. But the sound is there, right? So if there is a sound traveling within space, it will travel from one part to the other, but it will be not manifest in the areas in between because there is nothing to reflect that sound, inhibit that sound. So that reflection is not possible. So the all pervasiveness of space, it can be inferred from the fact that anywhere we travel in space, the words can be uh, produced. Any kind of words can be produced in any part of space. So that is why there is no division. Nothing can divide the space.
So excuse me.
Yeah.
So you're saying that sound exists everywhere, but
Mhm.
if there is no medium to perceive it, you don't
Yeah.
perceive it. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Because sound, if sound will not be manifest in vacuum, right? It won't travel in vacuum. But if there is a sound at one end of jar and that at the other end, we say that the sound will not be perceived in the intermediate part, but it will be perceived at both ends, right? So there, the medium is not there, air is not there. So that is why sound is not being manifest. But here the sound is being, so we say in that intermediate also the sound is there, but it is not being manifest because it needs another, you know that rule we saw in Tattva Bodha, we call it Swatmani Kriya Abhavat. So anything cannot act upon its own self. Right? So this element, Akasha, is the source for sound. So Shabda is produced from Akasha only. So Shabda cannot act upon Akasha itself. It can act upon the remaining four elements. So that is why we need another medium where the sound will be manifest. But the sound is being produced through Akasha only because we perceive it through the element that is the uh, what we call derived from the sattvic part of Akash. That will go into Tattva Bodh also in the next class. But just we can understand this that from the five elements, the five sense organs are born. And they can perceive the five sense objects, which are again born out of that very sense, very Panchbhuta, the very element, right? So in this way, this sound is produced everywhere in space. That means there is no place where space sound cannot be perceived, cannot be produced, sorry. And only thing is, at some places we will not be able to hear it or manifest it because the medium is not there. Just like for consciousness, it's everywhere, right? But we need a medium to and perceive it, right? So when the body is there, we can understand the consciousness working through it. Without the body, we will not be able to tell. So just like same, this electricity is everywhere in all the wires, but we need to connect it to some kind of instrument. Then by the function of that instrument, if it is a fan, it will rotate. If it is a light, it will glow. So then we can know that electricity is there. So same way with sound also and other things also. This we need some medium for their manifestation. George, you are asking something? Yes,
Yeah,
George? Yeah.
by sound, are you referring more to vibrations in space-time
Yeah, vibrations.
rather than necessarily the experience of sound? Like, for
Yeah.
example, in a vacuum, there's no audible sound because there's no medium to conduct a sound, but yet there are still vibrations in space-time.
Yeah, there is always
Is
vibrations.
that
Right. Yeah.
so? When you refer to sound, are you referring more to the space-time vibration aspect of it?
Yeah, vibrations. Vibration ultimately translates into sound, no? When it interacts
Hmm.
with your ear of hearing, your ear or your organ of hearing, then that vibration produces the effect where you are able to cognize the sound, right? So if it is very subtle, maybe you will not be able to hear because we saw in the earlier sutra also, no, patu mand bhavat. So if the sense organ is not sensitive enough, but there are other animals who can perceive those lower vibrations or higher vibrations also, no? Like dogs can hear uh, the sounds that are in the higher spectrum of hearing. So humans have only up to 20,000 hertz, but dogs, I think 50,000, or is it 70,000, George?
I don't know the exact figure.
Uh, Something like that. I forget. But yes, we studied in science. So it was around 50,000 or 70,000. So the vibration is there. The perception might depend on the hearer, right? But the vibration is traveling through space, time, right? And that vibration can be perceived when there is a medium. So on that medium, it will vibrate. So in the case of the ear, it is this solid medium. In the case of air, there will be a sound which you can hear from afar itself, right? So all these sounds are there. They can be produced anywhere in space. That is the basic concept here. So that means, yes, we are saying that space is sarvagata. It is present, omnipresent, right? So we have done 45 minutes or so. Shall we complete 1 hour or shall we wind up for today?
Anything
You
is
want
okay
to
with me, sir?
continue?
Yes.
Yes, George?
Yeah, I'm happy to continue as well.
Okay. So we'll just take a couple of sutras, and so this argument we can, round off. We'll just go to the next. So again, into the properties of sound. So avyuhu, avishtambaha, vibhutvani, cha akasha dharma. So there are certain properties of space. So which point towards its all pervasiveness. What are the properties? Avyuha. So it does not repel anything, right? So if something is all pervading, it will not repel anything because it cannot be split into parts, right? Of course, at the ends of the universe, we say this is there is a change in that space. That is mainly because we are manifesting another universe beyond that. In this space, there can be only this universe. So the property of space, firstly, is it will not repel anything. Avyuha. Then avishtambaha. It does not obstruct anything, right? And then vibhutvani. Vibhutvani is it's vibhu, all pervasive. So these properties show us these properties guide us to the intuition that because stopping and repelling other objects belong to objects with parts only, this thing can only be done by objects having parts. So the space, it does not have parts, so it is all pervasive, right? And then the next one. So मूर्तिमान च संस्थान उपपत्तेः अवयवः सद्भावः. So murti means anything having form. Huh? So anything having form. So this objection again is raising Murti Mancha Sansthan Upapattehe Avyava Sadbhava. So if this Parmanu that you're saying it has some form and it has of limited dimension. It has of limited dimension. So if there is an object of limited dimension and with some form, then it should be divisible into other further parts. So hence he's saying the Parmanu is not eternal again. By that logic, if you're saying the Parmanu has certain form, then it should again be divisible into further parts. And then the next one, why this Parmanu should also be further divisible into other parts? Sanyoga upapattehe cha. So this Parmanu, it can combine, right? It can combine with other objects. So that means if it is according to his logic, we'll answer that. So according to his logic, these two Parmanus are there, they will combine. So one part of this Parmanu is combining with the other part of this Parmanu, not the whole, right? So if it is, let us say, circular, then certain part of it is combining here. So this means this part has a certain, what we call a finite length or whatever. So that part you can further subdivide the Parmanu into those parts. So that means the Parmanu you cannot say is undivisible. That is the argument. So at the fact that atoms possess this quality of conjunction or coming together, this will prove that the atoms will have they are divisible into different parts. This can come about only when we bring those atoms together. So this combination can only happen if we assume that they have parts. So this is now again refuted by using a logical fallacy here. What is the logical fallacy? Anavastha karitvat anavastha upapattehe cha apratishedha. So he says anavastha dosh is there. What is the anavastha dosh? In modern logic, it is called regress at infinitum. Right? So if we say that this is the final particle, then we can further divide it. Then that particle, I'll call it Parmanu. Or if you're saying another division will happen, then that particle I'll call Parmanu, and so on and so forth. So he says this objection is not tenuous. It is not correct. It is not having a logical continuity. So otherwise, what will happen? Anavastha dosh will happen. Anavastha dosh will happen. I have to finally accept which is the final entity. Just like in the case of consciousness, we see that it is the final, the final drashta, the final seer. It cannot be a separate seer from me because I have proved myself as infinite. That is why this whole world of this cyclic world, we call it as mithya, because everything in the world is cyclic. Everything is cyclic. So if everything is cyclic and it is projected upon this consciousness itself, that means the other objects, they don't have any existence. Otherwise, coming to the ultimate cause will not be possible, right? So if there is an ultimate cause that is infinite, then the parts must be a projection only. Now, it can only be an illusion. So this is that is in a different sense for Atma. But here what we are talking about Parmanus, we are saying anavastha karitvat, anavastha upapattehe cha apraticheda. You cannot use this argument to say that the Parmanus are divisible, because this will lead to the logical fallacy called regress ad infinitum. If you divide a Parmanu into another two parts, then we can keep on going dividing till you say it cannot be further divided. Then I will call that final entity as the Parmanu. And then, of course, to get into a deeper understanding of what Parmanu is, it is not treated here in Nyaya, because it is treated in very much huge detail in Vaisheshika. But what there is, the mind-boggling concept is treated there, that in Vaisheshika what is said is the Parmanu has zero size and mass also it comes to zero because it then merges with the total infinity. So if you know about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, so there if we take any particle like the electron, and we cannot locate it in space, we can only approximate it by the product of the momentum and the position. So if we make the position zero, the momentum will become infinite. And if we make the momentum zero, the position will become infinite. That is it. That means it is located infinitely through space. So same thing, same logic we use in Vaisheshika, where we say that when something has become so subtle that it has reached the limit of subtlety. उससे subtle हो ही नहीं सकता. Nothing can be more subtle than it. That means it has zero available momentum. And then also, why zero available? No place for it to move. If there is no separate thing from it, it has become so small. And sukshma means what? Something is sukshma means it is smaller in size but more pervasive. So something is sukshma tamam, of the highest order of sukshma, then it is infinite. So in a way, this Parmanu is one with the whole universe, or even the Atma, you can say. It is not separated from that. So it is located everywhere. This Parmanu is located everywhere in space. So it has a potential size, of course. It has a potential size. But when will that size be visible? When that Parmanu is imparted a vibration. The moment it is imparted a vibration, each Parmanu has its own inherent vibration, we call it. Just like we have a tuning fork in science experiments, we do it no in physics. So it has its own vibration frequency. So when we just bang it, then it will vibrate with the frequency that belongs to that. Similarly, each Parmanu has its own vibration frequency. So when it is imparted that impetus, it starts to vibrate, then it takes a size, and then it becomes visible. And then it becomes available for combination. And also we say there that this combination is, when it is happening, the combination with other Parmanus is born through what we call attractive forces. The attractive forces bind them together. Just like in the atom, we have the different forces that bind together the nucleons and the electrons. The protons, neutrons, and electrons, they have binding forces. So there it is not like a part of one Parmanus connecting with another part. Both the Parmanus are held together by a force, a combinative force. And then together they become one composite entity which has a certain size and a mass. So in this way, the Parmanu we cannot say is what we call composed of further parts. Otherwise, we'll reach the what we call the limit size. The limit size, at the limit, we'll finally reach the limit where it will have no available size. So in this way, what we are saying basically is that the parts, they don't need to combine. The forces just bring them together to form this composite entity, right? So this is, we have understood about the Parmanu. Right? And then finally, how we apply that logic to our body and let go of our ego, that we will look into the next class. So I think we have done a good amount of, covered a good amount of ground. We have gone to 25. No, we started with 11. So we've done 14 sutras today. So next we'll go into the realm of thought. That we'll look in the next class. I think we'll wind up for today. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.